Life in the desert was truly adventurous. Somebody came into one of the drilling camps we were living in at the time and said they had found a Roman well out in the desert. And so we asked a lot of questions. Where was it? Could he take us there and so on? We had some spare time, so a few of us got in a truck and went to what we thought was the location for this Roman well, not actually believing that there was one. But as it turned out, we came to a valley between two escarpments. The valley wasn't real deep, but down in the base of that valley was a Roman well. And in fact, it was so old, it may have been actually used by the Greeks before the Romans came into Libya. Not sure about that. But the rock rim around the edge of the well had deep grooves in it where ropes had been lowered down and then they were pulled back up, done over centuries perhaps of time, wore those grooves into those rocks. How deep that well was, I have no idea. It was probably deeper than what we could see, and it looked deep. But there was a lot of sand in the bottom, so my guess is it was deeper. But what was really interesting, the well itself, deep in the bed of this valley, had a road leading up to it. You could just barely see it. It was made of rock and small bits of broken rock. But it was in the very design that you would anticipate for a Roman road. So I believe what we were looking at was a Roman road that was built out into the desert. This wasn't far from the Mediterranean. It was not deep in the desert. But the road was obvious. It was visible. So anyway, we began to investigate, checking around the well. But up on the cliffs of the escarpments that overlooked that well, there were actually rocks in place that looked like walls. And that seemed rather odd, so we climbed up to see what that was all about. There were two things we found. One would have been possibility of where tanks had been put into place behind these rock walls. This was the scene, we don't know exactly what battle, but this was the scene of some sort of military activity during World War II. The reason we know that is that as we began to investigate where we think that tank emplacement was, there were also smaller stone walls that were set up for kind of like a machine gun nest. And in those trenches behind those stone walls, we found all kinds of things. A lot of shells from machine guns, the casings. Not a lot, but there were enough. One of the guys found a wine bottle stuck into the stones that formed that wall. There was evidence of cigarettes. I don't recall what that was. A pack of cigarettes or something. It's very dry in the desert, so these things would last without rotting. At any rate, the cigarettes and the wine suggested that this was used by the Italians during World War II. So when we began to look around, it was kind of like, whoa, we are right in the center of history, though we didn't know the details of what exactly transpired there. My guess is that well was extremely important to the Italians, if in fact they were the ones that were emplaced there. All that armament was just to protect that well. They needed the water. But it was probably a battleground site because others wanted that water, like maybe the British and the Americans, and even the Germans. But it was really a beautiful site, especially to see a Roman road, if indeed that's what it was, a Roman road built clear out into the desert for water resources. Very interesting.
Anything else you want to share about things you found? You want to talk about finding the little caches of things in the rocks?
Didn't I do that?
You want to touch